Cloud. And here we go. We are recording. Kick it off, Eugene.
Alrighty, so today we have Paul Reeves, who spoke up about talking of using Ansible to deploy to LogStream and manage the deployment. And then we held him to that commitment. So take it away, Paul. And thank you, because I know a lot of work goes into that.
You are welcome. Presenting is the easy part. Coding is the hard part. And hitting the play button is also the hard part. So hi, everyone.
Say it's the other way.
Well, it's easy now that the work is done. How about that? So hi, everyone. Like Eugene said, my name is Paul Reeves, and I'm going to be talking about using Ansible to deploy to LogStream and how we're also using it to manage our leader node and worker nodes up in AWS. I didn't do too much prep work for this. I just kind of threw everything together Sunday afternoon. It's not going to be nearly as formal as anything else. I do love talking about this stuff, though. So if you do have questions, feel free to interrupt me and ask me any questions along the way. So my name is Paul Reeves, and I work at the University of Arizona. I graduated from here longer ago than I would like to admit. And I've worked in a bunch of different IT departments around the university. Most recently, I'm now in the Information Security Office, and I lead the security engineering team. The security engineering team helps manage and deliver and get value from security-related services like our log analytics platform, and by extension, anything that feeds into our log analytics platform like LogStream. So let's talk about what Ansible is. Ansible, technically speaking, is a domain-specific language, a DSL with a lot of plugins. It is mostly used for infrastructure as code and configuration management on different servers. It really is almost like a full-fledged programming language, though. It's similar to other configuration management software like Puppet and Chef and SaltStack. And if you really want to stretch it, PowerShell DSC on Windows. Ansible is run from your machine, and I'll show you how that's done. Usually Ansible reaches out to target machines that are in the inventory to run code and configurations on those target machines. Ansible is great because it's agentless. You don't have to have any agent installed on those target machines like you do some of the other things. I've never used Puppet or SaltStack or Chef, but I know at least one of those does require an agent. So no agents are necessary with Ansible. It just needs Python on the target machine and usually SSH access, but there are some plugins you can use to get around that requirement for SSH access. And it's all YAML. Everything inside of Ansible is YAML. So if you're used to working with that, it is pretty easy to work inside of. So let's talk about what problems Ansible is solving for us. We needed a way to deploy all of our CloudFormation templates up in AWS and deploy our LogStream worker nodes and our leader node. We have everything inside of source control. For infrastructure as code. We have a really strong infrastructure as code practice on the team. That includes CloudFormation. So we needed a way to deploy all the CloudFormation. We also needed a way to deploy new LogStream configurations to the leader node and then to the worker nodes from the leader node. And I'll show you how that's done later on. We can walk through the code. I'm going to draw it out and also do a deploy. Just a non-prod though, not prod. Not going to eat anything to prod right now. That's tomorrow. We, like I said, have a really strong infrastructure as code practice, and we needed a way to take all of the code that we were running inside of, or developing in non-prod and move it between non-prod and prod so that we could test it out before we deployed anything to prod. Have it in GitHub for for code review so that everyone on the team can point out all of my horrible spelling mistakes. And when I use 2 dashes, when I only need to use 1, and it breaks some things, which happens a lot. Well, okay, I don't break things a lot. I have spelling mistakes a lot. That's like 90% of my pull requests in comments on the PRs. And last but certainly not least, we needed a way to easily recover prod from a bad config. There were a few times when I was building out LogStream in July in non-prod that I kicked off a deploy. And then even after 5 minutes, the leader node said, hey, I don't have any worker nodes attached. And it's because something like I put in a bad cert path and LogStream didn't want to start up on the worker nodes. So we needed a way to recover from that quickly. So from here on out, it's all going to be screen shares and demos, which is, I think, a whole lot better than, it's not death by PowerPoint, because this isn't PowerPoint, this is Keynote. I don't like to use PowerPoint for reasons. So I'm going to talk about how, draw it out, how we're doing our deploys to how we're deploying worker nodes first. And when I said I didn't do a lot of prep work, I wasn't kidding. Frantically bringing up all the notes and the drawings that I made previously. Okay. So all of our worker nodes up in AWS are in an AWS auto-scaling group. And you get to see my horrible chicken scratch, especially when I'm trying to run on the tablet. Whenever we need to spin up a new worker node, it's just an EC2 instance as part of an auto-scaling group. So auto-scaling will kick off the deployment of that EC2 instance. From there, like I said earlier, normally Ansible is run over like an SSH connection from a administrator's machine. So normally I would run Ansible from my machine and it would configure the EC2 instance, but we're not doing that for a few reasons. Instead, what we're doing is in the user data of the EC2 instance, we're kicking off the instance downloading all of the code from an S3 bucket. And then the instance is configuring itself with Ansible. That's not a poorly written A, that's actually the Ansible logo. So the instance is running the Ansible code against itself to configure itself. We're doing that in this case so that if we ever had an instance go bad in the auto-scaling group, auto-scaling would just replace that instance automatically. We wouldn't have to log in at like 3 in the morning when the instance died and have to run that code manually. Running the code locally like this, just having the code run against localhost, is also a whole lot faster than having it run over SSH, especially when you're on a slow connection, like if you're on DSL. It's just so much faster. Another reason is that if you have 4 different instances that you're trying to configure at once, and let's say this instance over here on the right was running like a quarter of the speed as the others, Ansible runs almost all of the tasks in serial as opposed to parallel. So it would run the first task and then the second task and then the third task. Since it runs everything in serial as opposed to parallel, it means that all 3 of these nodes over here would be waiting for this 4th one. So overall, the entire thing is slower. If you have instances configuring themselves, like we're doing right here, it's a whole lot faster because all the instances just run as fast as they can. And then whenever they're done, they're done. And did I mention it's faster than over SSH? Since we're not configuring anything over SSH, we also don't need that SSH access. So it helps improve our security a little bit. 22 isn't open to any of these instances from anywhere. And we don't have SSH keys or user and password set on any of the accounts. So there's no way to SSH into these boxes, which also helps improve security posture. I am in the information security office after all. I need to think about these kind of things, at least on paper, theoretically. We can still get to these instances though through AWS Systems Manager, which just opens a shell in a browser, and that is significantly more secure than SSH access. So stop share over here, pick up the sharing over here. I'm going to walk you through some of the code. After I try to zoom in.
Sorry to
Uh,
interrupt, but do you mind if people interrupt with questions, or would you like people to wait?
Oh,
till
not
the
at
end?
all. No, I want this to be as interactive as possible. Yeah. I love
Okay,
talking
cool.
about this kind of stuff and answering questions.
Just wanted to make sure. Thanks.
Oh, yeah. Ansible does require that, it did zoom in, I just didn't see it. Ansible requires that certain files be in certain places. So when we're kicking off and building a new worker node, and I have 3 new ones that should be ready to go by now in non-prod. I started building those about half an hour ago, and usually only takes like 5 minutes. It kicks off of these, when we're building a new worker node, it kicks off these specific roles. And roles are kind of like collections of tasks that you can reuse in multiple places. Tasks are like an individual configuration setting in a configuration file, or a specific or an individual command like run yum update, or run a shell command, or do different things like that. So you roll up tasks into roles. And like I said, Ansible is really picky about the folder structure and the file structure and how you name everything. I dropped the link in the chat to the Ansible documentation. That's super worth reading if you're ever going to start looking at using Ansible. So these are the roles that Ansible will run when we're building a new worker node. I'm not going to go through all these, but we do prep work to grab different information about the instance, like the instance ID, the tags, what region it's in, what availability zone it's in, that kind of stuff. Base config will update the instance, set the host name, do anything like set up SE Linux, make SE Linux exceptions. For me, it installs VI, because at this point, I don't think I can use anything else on the command line, but someone else on my team can't figure out how to exit VI. So we make sure that Nano and Pico are installed as well. Cribl base just downloads the TGZ from the S3 bucket, and then sets LogStream up and all that stuff. Cribl worker is the role that we're going to dig into just a little bit after I zoom out. So these are different tasks inside of the Cribl worker role. The first thing it's going to do is grab all of the secrets we need to configure this role, to configure the server as a worker node. We use AWS Systems Manager parameter store, that's SSM. It's similar to other things like HashiCorp's Vault and even Ansible Vault, but we use Systems Manager because it integrates really well. It's first party at AWS, so it integrates really well with their identity and access management system. From there, what this is going to do is dynamically discover and create all of the pipeline files that we need. And those pipeline files are located, I don't think I can zoom in on the left, unfortunately, only the right, inside of this folder for prod. So these are all of the pipelines we have. And Ansible is going to, like I said, dynamically discover all of these folders, create the folders it needs, and then looks at all of these template files, and then creates the template files that are needed. The template files really are just like configuration files. They're almost straight YAML. The only difference is that you'll see this one's in all the pipelines, they're always called like conf.yaml. And then for here, they're .j2. The .j2 indicates that this is a Jinja 2 template format. And Jinja 2 is really cool because what you can do is swap in variables as needed into the template and indicate those variables with those double squiggly brackets. So Ansible is going to see that variable and it's going to swap all of that out with the name of our deployment environment. And since this is non-prod, it's just going to be TSD for test. And then if we were running this in our prod environment, it'd be PRD for prod. It's sort of useful inside of routes, but where it's really useful for us with LogStream is inside of the outputs file, because we're swapping in the deployment environment, then the whole DNS zone name to construct the cluster manager for our Splunk indexer cluster. If I can type like that. And Ansible is pulling those configurations out of the variables files that we have in here. So it's super useful for dynamically creating and changing template files and YAML files and other kinds of files as you need to, as the code is all running. So it'll create all those pipeline files. It'll set up other files that are needed, like the instance.yaml file, to set the certificate path correctly, set the DNS zone correctly again, and set the group name correctly. And then set it up so that Cribl can actually listen on 5.1.4, which is important because all of our syslog comes in over that. And then adds all the lookups that are needed and configures the backup script that's needed because we have a backup script running on everything. And then finally, it will, this playbook will make sure that the Cribl process is restarted so that the worker node will pick up its new configurations and connect up to the leader node to download its newest configuration. So that's deploying a worker node. The leader node is pretty similar, and I'm going to talk about that one now. So whenever we're deploying, actually not leader node, sorry, deploying a new configuration to our worker nodes through our leader node. So just like we're doing with deploying a new worker node, all of the code is up in S3. We are copying that S3 code, or that code up to S3. And then we are kicking off an AWS Systems Manager run command. So AWS likes to just throw services into Systems Manager, like parameter store, and like run and like session manager and a whole bunch of other things. But Systems Manager just kicks off a command on another server. So I'll show you what this looks like in the code, and we'll actually walk through this as well. So we're copying up the code to S3, and then we kick off a Systems Manager call to Systems Manager, which in turn calls the leader node, and the leader node will download all the code from S3 and start running against itself with Ansible. It will create all those YAML files that are needed. It will restart itself, and it will do a commit inside of Cribl on the local Git repository, and then do a deploy to all of the worker nodes. Horribly drawn arrows. So that's kind of that's the overview of the process that we're doing for deploying Cribl configuration to our worker nodes. The code is going to look really similar too.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If you're getting your configs from the leader, what's the advantage of deploying configs initially to the workers when you bring those up?
Great question. The reason we're doing that is mostly because I wrote all this code first, and I didn't really want to take it out. So that's a whole bunch of reasons, like laziness is one reason. Another reason is that running some of this code will take a few minutes, and having it connect up to the worker node, the leader node, and download it will take potentially a few minutes as well. So when we're scaling out, when we're launching a new worker node, having it configure itself means that that worker node is up and running and receiving requests just a few minutes earlier.
Cool.
So when we're deploying a new configuration to the worker nodes, there's only one role that it runs, this Cribl worker config deploy. And this is really similar to the deploying a new worker node because it does almost the same things. It's just this is running on the leader node as opposed to each individual worker node. So gets all the secrets. I mean, first make sure that Cribl is running, because if it's not, then none of this will work. Grabs all the secrets, creates folders that are needed, dynamically creates the pipelines, discovers the pipelines, and creates the pipeline folders it needs. Same thing, goes through all the template files and creates those template files, copies the lookups to the worker node directory. We're just using the default worker group. So copies to the default directory, or the default group data directory so the worker nodes can use the lookups. And then we're also copying the lookup to the leader nodes data directory for lookups so that we can see the lookup on the leader node as well. This is an important one. Copies all the right certs to the correct locations, because if the certs aren't there, LogStream will not start up. After copying all the files, the leader node will restart itself. And it does this because there are some configuration files. When you make changes to the configuration files directly on the leader node doesn't know that those changes were made unless you do a restart. You can do a reload for some configuration files, a restart for other configuration files. So we're just doing a restart for everything. And then it catches everything. It doesn't impact the worker node operations because the worker nodes just keep rolling with the configuration that they previously downloaded, the ones that this playbook is going to be replacing. And the leader node, it just means that it's inaccessible while the leader node is restarting. Then Ansible will log into the leader node and then do a commit deploy on the leader node. So let me walk through what that deploy is going to look like. Make sure I'm logged in.
Meanwhile, do you run any scheduled collection jobs?
Yes, we do.
Okay, I'm just curious how that is handled when things are redeployed.
Yeah.
The leader node.
So yeah. Thanks for bringing that up, Eugene. So there, you'll notice that under templates here, we have one for prod and one for test. It's really small, sorry. I don't know how to, yeah, zooming in just does the code zoom in. We do have separate sets of configurations for non-prod and prod for those collection jobs specifically. We don't necessarily want some of those collection jobs running in non-prod that we're running in prod. It won't necessarily break anything in non-prod, it just doesn't need to run. So log in and make sure that we have worker nodes. We do, cool. So I went into AWS about like 45 minutes ago and set it to spin these up. These are all new worker nodes that were created just using the process that I drew out and we walked through. And you'll notice that all of these, I can't see the configuration version because I'm zoomed. Oh, yeah, FF8. It's running the FF8 config version. And what I'm going to do is change a comment on one of these and then in the code and then kick off a deploy and we'll see that that comment actually got changed. So sure, the CloudFront access pipeline. Actually, I'll just go to a source. So I'll just rename this source. I'll just rename this from syslog 514 to like syslog 514-demo. So let me switch back to the code. And that is going to be in inputs YAML J2, syslog 514, call this one syslog 514-demo. And then we have all of our code that we need to run written out in a playbook. So this command will sync up all of the code and the code that I just changed to the S3 bucket. It's really exciting letting this run. And then this huge block of command will, I'll kick this off and then I'll show you what it's, and then I'll explain what it's doing. Cool. Sometimes that returns an error message and usually it's my VPN being flaky. So this is kicking off that AWS command through Systems Manager. And what it's really doing is telling the leader node to run these 3 commands. So it's going to download everything in that S3 bucket that I just copied up and synced all the changes for, it will then launch that deploy worker config playbook, this one right here. And like I walked through, that's going to create all those pipeline files, grab all the secrets we have from systems manager parameter store, create the inputs and outputs configuration YAML files, all the configuration files that the worker node needs. And then it's going to do the commit deploy. And then once all that stuff is done, then the leader node will delete all of the local Ansible code it just downloaded that it ran right here and downloaded right here. That way we're not just leaving code on the server. And yep, that error message indicates that the leader node did restart. Yep, and the input name was renamed. See if the worker nodes came back up. That's the real test. Yeah, and the config version changed as well. And before I forget, I'm going to change that back. Because otherwise I'm going to log in and go, hey, why aren't we getting any syslog data? And the whole deploy only takes a couple minutes. It works really well so far. Okay. You can tell how much I've used Keynote. Definitely know how to use it. So how's this going / lessons learned that we have? Overall, this has been going really well because almost everything inside of LogStream is just flat YAML configuration files. And that lends itself really well to working inside of a source code repository like GitHub or Git, and for managing all the configuration files through Ansible. Ansible does really well when you give it plain text configuration files like YAML or JSON or conf files, INI files. Yes, running the Ansible code locally works a whole lot better than doing it over the remote, at least for our use cases. Specifically for LogStream. We have some other use cases, like we're running Tenable scanners out of AWS, and we're doing a lot of the configuration for those through Ansible. With those, we are running those still from a local computer. So whenever we need to replace a Tenable scanner, I had to last week because one of them failed. I was running that code from my computer from this desktop instead of running it locally on the Tenable scanner up in AWS. Dynamically discovering all those pipelines and those template files was great. Originally, I wasn't doing this, and anytime I added a pipeline, I needed to go back and not only create the conf.yaml file for the pipeline, but also edit the Ansible code to make sure that the pipeline folder existed, and then to copy the configuration file to that pipeline. So that took a lot longer than it needed to. And it didn't, it took a lot longer. It took longer to code and it took longer to run. That whole process with, oops, this one right here with dynamically discovering all the templates and files, it's worked so well. I kind of wanted to do this as a trial with LogStream when I was building it out in July, and it's worked so well that I'm actually going back and rewriting all of the other deployment playbooks we have, like the ones we use for Splunk, to fit this new model. And I went through and rewrote the ones for the search-head cluster and the indexer cluster yesterday. I still have the one for ES. But like this dynamically discovering templates and files has worked so well that I'm switching everything over to it because it is easier to maintain and it's just much faster. Originally, we were using the same configuration files between prod and non-prod. We're not doing that now, like I mentioned earlier, just because we don't want those collection jobs running inside of non-prod. We just don't need them to run inside of non-prod. And then this also lets us like copy and paste the configurations from non-prod to prod and vice versa when we're doing testing, stuff like that. From what I found, LogStream is pretty resilient to me screwing up configuration files, which is great because it means I can easily recover from a bad configuration file. Specifically, I have messed up pipelines a few times, and named the file .conf.yaml instead of conf.yaml.j2. Ansible hasn't found it, hasn't deployed it, and LogStream has still run, it's still recovered. And then I just go back and rename the file. So it's been resilient to me screwing up, which is great. Even though we're managing all the configurations through GitHub and through Ansible, we are still doing some of the work inside of the UI. So I've been working a lot in collection jobs over the past couple of weeks, making different API calls. I've been doing that work in a container on my computer, and then just looking at the configuration files, it generates both the inputs and the pipeline files, and then copying and pasting that to the source code, and then deploying that with Ansible. Like that workflow has been working really, really well. We could also do that kind of work on non-prod, and then just copy and paste in the UI still, and then just copy and paste the code to prod to deploy and remove that code from non-prod. So this process that we have doesn't necessarily mean we have to do all of our changes and all of our work inside of the configuration files. In the future, I think I'd like to look at adding logging from Ansible to Cribl. Ansible can send and ship logs from the different tasks that are run to a different destination. So I'm going to look at whether I can add logging from Ansible in the Ansible code that I'm running to Cribl. The one concern that I have about doing this is if I deploy some Ansible code or deploy a new set of configuration files to LogStream, the worker nodes, and it breaks the worker nodes, I'm not going to get the logs from it. So this one might not end up happening. We might just keep checking the logs inside of the AWS console. I saw that Nick Tank posted something in Slack yesterday about potentially doing GitOps with Cribl. And if that was deployed, I would immediately switch to that off of the solution that I have right now. I have no problem replacing any work that I've done with a better solution. So back in late October 2019 or early November 2019, I spent some hours creating an Ansible playbook and CloudFormation to spin up a new EC2 instance, install all the software we need, update it, set the name, shut it down, take a snapshot of the EBS volume, create a custom AMI off of that EBS volume snapshot so that we could deploy our Splunk indexers faster. I did all of that work, and then 2 weeks later, that was one of the first announcements at AWS reInvent 2019 was EC2 Image Builder. And within like 2 weeks of that coming out, we had switched to EC2 Image Builder because it was a better solution. So like I said, if Cribl LogStream does get the option of doing GitOps and downloading configuration files and from different branches, and then deploying those configuration files like via Git to different worker groups, that's going to be a better solution, and we'll move to it right away. So first party stuff is usually better. And given how well new features are implemented inside of LogStream, I wouldn't be surprised if that was coming down the pipe. It sounds like it is anyway. So that is all that I had. I'm trying to find my cursor. There it is.
And you just talked about how you kind of adapt to whatever the latest thing that came out. Have you considered changing anything in your setup for packs?
Yes, right now. So since July, our focus has really been getting data into and flowing through LogStream. I think next quarter, one of our OKRs is going to be actually reducing data. And yeah, packs should be on the list of different things that I want to implement. Maybe we end up deploying a lot of our configuration using a pack, and then we can use other packs that are in the dispensary as well. Yeah, packs should, I'm gonna write them all down.
Because it seems, one of the things they do is help you move a configuration from one place to another.
Yeah, that should be something I look at. I haven't spent a whole lot of time inside of packs.
I had a question.
Yeah.
I don't know if this definitely wouldn't work for your first instance deployment, but we've had luck using the Splunk callback to be able to write to an HTTP endpoint for logging with Ansible.
Yeah, I know that they have, I've seen posts on that of how to have Ansible send over hex to Splunk. And that would be kind of what I'm looking at doing instead of potentially going to Splunk, it's going to Cribl. Unless I, again, break Cribl and then we don't get those logs.
Yeah, that's the only caveat.
Yeah.
LogStream's not there to listen to something. Then
It's kind of difficult to have it pick things up, yeah. Kind of the same reason that we're using CloudWatch to make sure that processes are running inside of LogStream, because if LogStream is down, LogStream can't tell us that it's down.
Yep. So are you planning on publishing this anywhere?
I haven't published any of the code for pretty much anything we're doing. I'd have to go back and figure out how to clean it up so that,
Yeah.
you know, there aren't any typos, because there will be. I guarantee you there are typos. And it's kind of a difficult problem because this is really specific to our use cases. If people aren't deploying configurations exactly like ours, like if they're not spread across 3 availability zones in AWS, in US West 2, then some of this isn't going to be working. So it's kind of hard to take this and generalize it and then publish it.
Understood.
Any more questions? Going once? Going twice? You may never ask questions ever again after this. Just kidding.
I'm in the Slack, and like I said, I love talking about this stuff. So if you have questions or something like that, hit me up in the user group Slack.
Okay, Tree, were you just giving me shit, or were you going to ask a question?
No, I was going to ask a question. My mic just was refusing to work.
Go for it.
All right. Yeah. So Paul, just curious. So have you guys tried upgrading from one version to another, and have you seen any issues with that sort of a thing?
Okay, remember how I said that I get to eat stuff tomorrow? Yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. I'm going to be upgrading from 304 to 311. The plan for that right now is to upgrade the leader node and then update all of the code inside of the S3 bucket, including the TGZ file. So it points to 311 instead of 304, and then just kick off an instance refresh inside of AWS. So auto scaling will pick one victim out of the worker pool at random, spin up a new worker node, wait for that one to become healthy, then terminate the old worker node in that availability zone. And then it'll do the same thing for each one in turn until they're all upgraded. That's what I'm going to try to do in non-prod tomorrow, test it out, make sure it works, and then do it in prod.
Cool.
I think it'll work.
We think it should work. Yeah, I think it should
Yeah.
work too. But just it would be great to see that, see a proof of that.
Yeah. I have never tried that. I have it written down in our documentation that that's how we do upgrades, though. So I'm going to be testing that tomorrow.
Nice.
Awesome. Let us know how it works.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, it should work because all the worker nodes are stateless, and we have a bunch of lifecycle hooks around the worker nodes to remove them and add them to DNS records as needed. So I have done an instance refresh in non-prod before, as we've been getting syslog data, and we didn't drop any syslog data while that instance refresh was going. So it should work.
Awesome. Yeah. And I guess you guys do know that we are working on a GitOps feature. So hopefully things should be smoother once we get that out.
I'm excited about that. I love replacing janky stuff that I've written with something supported.
That's so boring though, Paul.
It's really not. No, it's not. I've gone back and decommissioned so many different Lambda functions and just replaced it with different things that LogStream can do. It's been great. I'm like, oh, I don't need this Lambda function anymore. It's gone. I get to decommission this. Oh, I don't even need the server anymore. This is great.
Means you have to make more janky stuff.
More
No,
bandwidth
no,
for
wait,
janky
no.
stuff.
No, replace the janky bad stuff with the good supported stuff. That's my goal.
Right, and it frees you up to do more janky stuff that's not supported yet until that's supported, and then it's a cycle.
Yeah, I mean, I think one
the
of the great
job?
things about, sorry, go
Oh,
ahead.
no. It's like, that is the job of a sysadmin, of an ops person, of a developer, to evolve your janky stuff into non-janky stuff.
Yeah,
keep
and
making
it's
them.
awesome. Like I mean, I feel that the Cribl customer base is awesome that way, because you guys do stuff before we get to it, and then you tell us, hey, this is what's working for me. So it's, you give us a lot more ideas about how to implement things better. So kudos to you guys.
Any more questions? Anybody want to volunteer to talk next time? Anybody doing anything amusing? We'll have to hassle people in chat and
Yeah.
get some topics. Or we can always watch Eugene's holiday picture slideshows.
Yeah, that's a thread that will get people talking.
All right. Are we doing a raffle this time, Eugene? What's going on?
If you have stuff, I have dice.
I always have stuff. We're gonna get some new stuff sometime soon, but I don't know when. So we are at 11 people who are not Criblanians and therefore are not eligible for swag.
D12, it is.
All right.
Let's see. Yeah, I got tired of setting up the whole tower so you can see it. So let's see. 12 gets re-rolled. 9.
9. That is Mark Byrne. Is he still here? Yes, I see Mark. Mark. Oh, we got the echo. Well, DM me with your info and I will send you, I need your t-shirt size and your mailing address, and I will send you a package of Cribl stuff. Let's do one more.
All right. It's a 5.
5 is David Sheridan. Woo woo. So David, do the same. DM me on Slack with your info, and I will send you a package of swag.
Will do. Thank you.
Excellent.
Awesome.
All right. What do we have? Any other business? I think just put up the link to last week's SE office hours in the YouTube channel in case you were looking for that. And I think there's going to be a blog post about it too. It's about consuming 3D printer logs into Cribl. It was kind of cool. Someday I'll get one of those things. I'll probably just make dice and gaming miniatures with it. Maybe tiny goats. I don't know.
There you go.
New handles for my blinds that need new little handles, that kind of stuff. But until then, I will suffer. Cool.
I had, well, if people have seen it in general, I don't know if others have run into the problem of losing incoming, let's say UDP, right? Incoming UDP data and not knowing that you're losing it because for whatever reason Cribl isn't keeping up. Don't seem to have a place to look to see that's happening. I saw Ben nodding. I don't know if that means yes, you've had that problem, or it's an interesting one.
Yeah, I had that, and it turned out to be our load balancer in front of Cribl. So once I was able to get some stats on the load balancer, and I was basically able to prove it there.
Oh. That's not fun. That's an easy answer. Yeah, in my case, it seems to be, and it is an older version, so I'm waiting till we get to 3.11. But I don't think it's gonna solve the issue, right? If for whatever reason, you don't have the Cribl capacity to handle what's coming in, how do you know that that's the case?
I think that's a bigger. Is that me? I think that's a bigger question. It's not really just a LogStream problem, right? It's anybody that's done syslog over UDP. And even in environments that you think are good, you're losing messages. You just don't know which ones.
Yes. And what I would love to do is have some way of saying, oh, looks like we need more, to spin up more workers and to be able to handle it. But I don't see the indicator that tells me I should add more workers, right? That they're being overloaded. Like, what should I be looking at for that is really
Yeah.
the question.
It's kind of the nature of UDP. It's meant to drop packets. So, and it's never going to tell you where they get dropped unless you use some kind of on the wire watching packets tool.
The closest thing I
Well-
could think of is like single threaded CPU usage on the worker nodes. If you see a single Cribl thread getting pegged at 100%, you might be having issues. And just general CPU usage too.
Yeah, that's the only thing I've kind of seen, and that seems to be weirdly. But again, that's an older version, so I'm going to wait till we have a new one and see if that reliably demonstrates it. Because now I know to look for it. I can just turn off some of the vCPUs, reduce the number of processes, and see, okay, am I where's that place where I need to start getting worried, and then set up some sort of alerting for that.
Yeah, or do something like configure a device to send 100 test packets, test messages, and then see how many of those show up.
There's a device that can send test packages, data gen, it could just send to itself. Huh.
Maybe,
that's if you
but that would only
suspect
test
that-
the network connection from LogStream back to LogStream, not necessarily like in our case. Yeah.
I'm gonna send it to the F5 that balances between the nodes. So that way it's definitely going out and back in, and that way, yeah, okay, I like that idea. See, user groups, that's what these are for.
People are going to cringe when I say this. So all of our worker nodes are up in AWS. We're doing syslog UDP. All of those syslog UDP sources are on-prem in Tucson. So it goes from Tucson into an AWS VPN connection all the way over to US West 2 in Oregon and hits a load balancer up there. So I can almost guarantee you we're dropping stuff, but there are reasons that we're doing that instead of running the worker nodes on-prem.
Yeah, but I love the idea of just having some sort of heartbeat that either makes it or not, and then I can see the percentage.
Yeah, then at least LogStream's not the problem
Well,
for the dropping of UDP packets, right?
Well, no, that's what I want to detect. I want to detect if LogStream is starting to become the problem.
Right. Yeah.
So
I'm just saying that the other way around, I think. Yes.
Yeah. So normally it would be, everything is getting through, and then all of a sudden, if some things are lost, then okay, cool. Thank you.
All right, y'all. Anything else to discuss? I just messaged you, Paul, in the user group channel. Send me your info so we can send you a hoodie for presenting. Thank you. And thanks for Gayatri for pointing out that we should give our speakers something nice.
Yeah, I remember
Like
we talked about that way in the beginning, but somehow.
Yeah, anyway.
There are too many things going on.
A lot going on. Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, thank you. I will always take a hoodie for the 3 weeks out of the year I get to wear one here.
Yeah.
You know what that's like.
I am aware. There's a reason I live in the Pacific Northwest. I'm never going back.
You can put it
What
on
is it outside? Oh, it's not even 100 outside. Yeah, this is hoodie weather.
Well, you have to go into the beer cave periodically, right, to replenish supply, so you can have hoodie for that.
Actually, the room I'm in, the room my office is in, it has an AC vent in the center of the room, and when I'm standing here, it blows directly on me. So most of the time, I'm wearing a hat or something as it gets too cold in here.
Yeah. You don't have a lot. You have your hair really short, so you're not. You've got to wear a hat to keep your head warm.
That is a legitimate concern of mine.
That was the issue. My office is in the loft, so all the hot air goes up here, and then they're having us come in to the office physically periodically. And I came in and I forgot to grab anything because I don't have an office anymore there, so I didn't have anything. I was freezing.
Oh, I'm not going to send you a hat, Paul.
No, I was going to say Marlo already sent me a hat, so I get to wear my Cribl hat, and I wear it when I'm working on Cribl stuff.
It's important to have the right gear.
Manifesting
is.
now.
All right.
All
Cool.
right.
Anyone else? Any other topics to discuss? Eugene?
Good.
All right. Then I think we're good for today. Thank you so much, Paul.
You're welcome. It was
Thank
my
you,
pleasure.
Paul. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll see you all next month. See you in chat sooner.
Excellent.
Bye, folks.
Thank you.
Bye.